Hello everyone. In this video lecture, we are going to continue the parts of alimentary canal and we are going to study the esophagus. The esophagus is also known as the food pipe. It is placed in the neck region. Last time we studied about pharynx, and if this is the place, the face region, this triangular structure is the pharynx, and here is the trachea, the opening, that is the glottis, and the gullet. So this is the gullet. This is very closely situated, and this is the opening of the trachea called as glottis. So the gullet is the opening of the food pipe. So this is where the food has to come in this direction, and when the food is coming in, the glottis is covered by a cartilaginous flap called as epiglottis. Now the food has to move in to the esophagus. The esophagus is a long pipe which is almost 25 centimeters in length. The esophagus is almost 25 centimeter in length. When the food comes inside, the food is in the form of bolus. The food is, at that time we call it as bolus. What is bolus? This is half chewed food, and this has been done mechanically with the help of teeth. So the food has been chewed mechanically by teeth and has been broken into pieces, and the food has also been mixed with saliva mechanically by teeth, and it has been mixed with saliva. Now this form of food is known as bolus. When the food is coming inside, the swallowing is scientifically known as deglutition. The process of the taking in of food is known as swallowing, which is scientifically known as deglutition. And the reverse process, when the food has to be regurgitated or belched out, it is known as regurgitation. So this esophagus, the first 1/3 part, it is divided into 3 parts. The first 1/3 part is made up of striated muscles, which we also call as skeletal muscles. So this 1/3 part is under our control. We know the striated muscles are also known as voluntary muscles. So when this is present in the neck region and when it has just taken into the esophagus, it is fully under one's control. And if the person wants to regurgitate, thinking that something wrong has been taken into the mouth, this can be regurgitated back, or it can be vomited back. So therefore this part is under our control, this 1/3 part. And the lower 1/3 part is totally made up of involuntary muscles, which we call as smooth muscles. This is not at all under our control, and this is a mixture of both striated as well as smooth muscles. Striated and smooth muscles both. So this 1/3 is, here the place is where we start losing the control, and when the food comes down, it becomes very difficult now for regurgitation. So this is a very thin pipe, and the entire alimentary canal, if we know the histology, if we study the histology, the entire alimentary canal is made up of 4 layers. What are the 4 layers? The first one is serosa. However, in the case of esophagus, this is called as adventitia. Adventitia. It is not called as serosa, but it is known as adventitia. The second layer is muscularis. This is the histology. That means we are studying the layers of the alimentary canal. So the entire length of the alimentary canal, these are the 4 layers, and I am talking it from the outer side. So this is the outermost, and this is the striated epithelium, squamous epithelium, and the second layer is muscularis. The third layer is submucosa, and the innermost layer is mucosa. We call this as mucosa because this continuously secretes the mucus, and the food is actually added up with more mucus over here. The mucus is added so that it becomes slippery for the food to go in, and the esophagus performs a very special function which we call as peristalsis. Peristalsis is the rhythmic contraction and relaxation of the muscles of esophagus. Here right now, because we are talking of esophagus, the rhythmic contraction and relaxation of the muscles. This causes actually the movement in the food, and therefore the bolus moves easily. This is a very thin tube-like structure, and when the morsel of the food is quite large, it becomes very difficult for it to come down. This opens into the stomach region. So the peristalsis facilitates the movement of the bolus, and this is the rhythmic contraction and the relaxation. Now let us see the next part, which is the stomach. This is the esophagus, which opens up in the stomach. The esophageal and the gastric, whatever is related with stomach, is actually called as gastric. So this is the gastric region and this is the esophageal region. Both of them communicate by a sphincter. This is actually a muscle which is known as a cardiac sphincter. This cardiac sphincter opens and allows the food to move in, and the stomach is a J-shaped organ. This looks like J, so it is a J-shaped muscular elastic organ. The inner lining, here also in the stomach there are the 4 layers, the serosa, the muscularis, the submucosa and the mucosa layer that I just talked about, and there are internal folds. We call this as gastric rugae. These folds open up when there is more intake of food. So this actually increases the surface area. These are known as gastric rugae, and thus the volume of the stomach can be increased. So we call it as an elastic organ. So this is the cardiac sphincter which opens and allows the food to come inside. The stomach has basically 3 parts. The part which is above, this elevated dome shaped structure, this particular part which I have labeled as 1, is known as fundus. The main part is known as a cardiac stomach, and the lower part is known as pyloric stomach. So the stomach is divided into 3 parts: the elevated dome shaped fundus, the middle cardiac stomach, and the lower portion which is known as pyloric stomach. This particular part of the stomach, this is actually, the stomach is towards the left of the abdomen, and this part is very close to the heart, so it has been named as cardiac stomach, although the word cardiac is always related to heart. But then we have called this part of the stomach as cardiac stomach because it is very closely situated to the heart, and this is the pyloric stomach, and this particular sphincter is known as the pyloric sphincter. So the opening of the stomach is guarded by cardiac sphincter, and when the food has to leave the stomach, it is guarded by pyloric sphincter. When both the sphincters are closed, the food has to remain inside the stomach. The food remains inside the stomach for almost 30 minutes to 4 hours. It depends upon what kind of food one has consumed. The least time is taken by carbohydrate digestion. So if a person has taken carbohydrate rich diet, the food will be very soon passed from the stomach out, it hardly takes 1 hour. If protein rich diet has been taken, it will be almost 2 to 3 hours. And then the food will be out of the stomach into the intestine. But if one has consumed fatty food, then it remains for a very longer time and one remains full, and it is the maximum limit, that is the 4 hours. So a person is not feeling hungry for a very long time because the stomach is already full, because of the fatty substances which takes prolonged digestion time. So this is what is the structure of the stomach. Now the stomach holds the food temporarily and then the food has to move into the intestine. What happens to the food inside the stomach? Now let us see how the stomach functions. The stomach produces the gastric juice. In a human adult, almost 1.5 liters of gastric juice is produced daily. So this is the secretion done by the stomach. So who secretes the gastric juice? The outermost layer of the stomach is serosa. Okay, this is the outermost layer, and inside of this is muscularis. Now muscularis is having 2 layers. The outer one is made up of longitudinal muscles. The inner one is circular muscles. These are the longitudinal muscles that are present. Then comes the circular muscles, and the innermost are oblique muscles. The oblique muscles are peculiarly found in stomach and at some places of the intestine. So these all 3 make the second layer, which is muscularis. The outermost is serosa, this is the outermost, which is 1, then the second layer is muscularis, and below this is the submucosa layer. This is number 3, and the innermost is the mucosa. Now this is the part which forms the innermost lining of the stomach. This has the glands. The glands that are present in the stomach are known as gastric glands. The gastric glands. What is the nature of gastric glands? They are simple, tubular, branched glands. What is the difference between simple and compound tubular branched? When it has just one tube-like structure and this has the branches in this manner, we call it as a simple tubular branched gland. If there are many more glands over here, then it becomes compound. So if it has just one duct-like structure, one tube-like structure, we call it as simple tubular branched gland. So this is how a gastric gland is. Now this gastric glands consists of many types of small cells which secrete the gastric juice. So here are the cells that are present. The entire mucosa has maximum goblet cells. As the name suggests, the goblet cells are the cells which secrete the mucosa. So this layer maximum these cells secretes the mucus. So the first type of cells are the goblet cells, and the goblet cells secrete mucosa. This is present in the mucosa layer. This I have drawn. The fourth layer is the mucosa layer, which is the innermost layer. So the outermost serosa, then muscularis, then submucosa, and the innermost is mucosa layer. What I have drawn in orange are all the goblet cells whose main function is to secrete the mucus. Now there are certain big cells. These big cells are usually present in this tube-like structure, and these are the oxyntic cells. The oxyntic cells produce the HCl. And the Castle's intrinsic factor will just deal with it. And then there are more cells which are present. These which are made in pink are the chief cells. There are certain triangular cells which are known as Argentaffin cells. I'll write over here. The third type of cells are the chief cells. The fourth one, Argentaffin cells. And one more type of cells are present, which are the G cells. The G cells. This actually is now a structure of a gastric gland which consists of so many cells, and all of these cells secrete the secretion which form the gastric juice. Now let us see the secretions. The goblet cells. The goblet cells are most numerous and they secrete mucus. Mucus is a thick secretion which is slimy, and its main function is to protect the inner lining of the stomach from the HCl. So this is quite thick layer. So it protects the stomach from HCl. HCl is quite corrosive and it is a strong acid, but this does not harm the internal layer of the stomach because there is an thick layer of the mucus, and the mucus does not allow the HCl to touch the lining of the stomach. It is only present in the lumen part. So the HCl only mixes up with the food. The second type of cells, the oxyntic cells. This was the first. Now the oxyntic cells. The oxyntic cells are also known as parietal cells. They produce two secretions. The first one is HCl. HCl is an acid, HCl acid, and it does many functions. The first function of HCl is that it maintains the pH. It maintains the pH of the stomach. It keeps the stomach's pH around 1 to 2 to 1.5. This is highly acidic. So any type of microbe which enters inside will get killed by the acidic content. So the HCl helps in maintaining the pH which is necessary for the activity of the enzymes. The enzymes are very specific for pH. They cannot act at an alkaline pH if they are acidic enzymes. So therefore the stomach maintains the pH, and this pH is maintained for the activity of the enzymes. Secondly, it kills all the germs. If any type of germ might have crossed the tonsil region and then it enters into the stomach, it is sure to die at this acidic pH. So it kills the germs. And the third one is that it activates all the enzymes. The enzymes that are found in the gastric juice are present in an inactivated form. The enzymes can never be in an activated form all the time, because if they are activated, if the enzymes are all the time activated, they will require the substrate. So the food is the substrate here. We cannot provide the stomach with the food all the time. So when the food is not provided, the enzymes may act on the stomach cells or the self cells itself. So whenever the food only comes, the inactive enzymes become activated. So rest of the time they are remaining in the inactivated stage. So who makes them activated? It's the HCl. So the HCl activates the enzyme. So these are the functions of the hydrochloric acid. So who produces the hydrochloric acid? The oxyntic cells. They are very few in number and they are large cells. The second thing that the oxyntic cells produce is the GIF. It is called as gastric intrinsic factor. This is also known as Castle's, named after the scientist, intrinsic factor. This factor is so much responsible for absorption of vitamin B12. Absorption of B12, that is cyanocobalamin. So whatever you have consumed, the vitamin B12, this is vitamin B12. So whatever you have consumed, the vitamin B12 is absorbed in the stomach itself. So it is not necessary that the absorption takes place in the intestine only. Some absorption of vitamins also takes place in the stomach. So the absorption of vitamin B12 is done by the gastric intrinsic factor, which is also known as Castle's intrinsic factor. This GIF, or the intrinsic factor, is secreted by the oxyntic cell. Now the next cells that we are going to study are the chief cells. The chief cells are also known as peptic cells or zymogen cells. These are the third type of cells, the chief cells or peptic cells or zymogen cells. They secrete the enzymes. The inactive form of pepsin enzyme is pepsinogen. This is the first enzyme that it secretes. This helps in digestion of proteins. So the protein digestion starts in the stomach. So pepsinogen is in active form and this will be converted into pepsin by HCl. This will be studying in detail when we study about the digestion of food. The second enzyme is prorenin. This helps in digestion of the milk protein. So this is also a proteolytic enzyme. It helps in digestion of protein, and prorenin is the inactivated form of enzyme and renin is the activated form of enzyme. This will also get activated by the HCl. And the third one is gastric lipase. However, lipase is actually a fat digesting enzyme. However, there is not fat digestion taking place in the stomach because of the high acidic content. The gastric lipase action becomes very less. So the maximum digestion that takes place in the stomach is that of protein. So the fat digestion does not take place in the stomach. It is mild. Therefore, the action is mild. However, it is produced, but then it is suppressed. It does not act much. But the three secretions are done. All these are enzymes. So the enzymes are secreted by the chief cells or the peptic cells, also known as the zymogen cells. Now the fourth type of cells are the argentaphin cells. These were triangular cells that were present. The argentaphin cells help in production of serotonin. So this helps in actually the contraction of the stomach. It helps in contraction, the outer layer of the stomach. And the fifth cells were the G cells. The G cells are present locally. That means they are only present in the stomach. They will not be found anywhere else, and it produces a hormone. That means the function of G cells is endocrine. The G cells are endocrine in function. So what is it producing? It is producing a hormone. The name of the hormone is gastrin. So what does this do? The gastrin actually is helping in the production of gastric juice. That means all the secretions, that means whatever secretion the different types of cells were doing, compose the gastric juice, and the gastric juice will be secreted only when the hormone gastrin will allow it to. So this is actually the precursor, and this helps in the production of the gastric juice. So the G cells help in the production of the gastrin hormone. So the action of gastric juice on the food, this is now the chemical action. When the food is chewed, that is mechanical action, and now all this action by the gastric juice is chemical action. This converts the food into a semi-solid mass, which is a pulpy mass. The semi-solid pulpy mass in stomach is called chyme. So this is the action. That means the food that is taken in through the mouth will be converted into chyme in the stomach by the action of gastric juice. Gastric juice is the combination of all the secretions that we studied right now and are produced by the different type of cells present in the gastric glands. So this is what is about the stomach. If you have any doubt in this video lecture, you may ask me in the comment section, and you may also refer to the questions that are given in the description box. Thank you.